Today we're going to be talking about drawing in one-point perspective using a photographic reference. And I'm going to go over some basic rules on how to just figure out what you're looking at, what's going on, and how to transfer what you see here in the photo to a larger sheet of paper. I will quickly say that all of the techniques that I'm discussing can easily be transferred to doing a drawing out of your imagination. So I'm working with a photo right now, just so that we're both on the same page. But keep in mind that if you feel kind of inspired by this, and you'd rather draw something out of your own head or from your own photos, everything that we do right now will transfer directly to that. So let's take a look at this photo. I chose this photo, which I took on a road trip while I was in Kansas, because it's so straightforward. You can see exactly where the vanishing point is. You can find it by tracing along the railroad tracks in this case, and you can see that they converge in one point here, which is towards the center of our sheet of paper. I'm going to be marking points that I discuss with a little piece of red chalk so that you can see what I'm talking about. So this here is our vanishing point, and it's on the horizon. So awesome, so easy to figure it out. Now what I'm going to do is use my little red piece of chalk to go ahead and trace some of the basic lines of the composition so that when I transfer this to my bigger sheet of paper, I will have some points of reference. So this one here, again, pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and use my little piece of chalk along that part of the railroad. I'm going through the center of this part of the railroad. The chalk is not precise, and indeed, this method that we're about to use is not mathematically precise, but that's okay because we're not trying to copy the photo exactly. We're just trying to get the basic idea of it so you can do your own drawing based on it. Now, what I'm going to do is choose some of the lines of some of the buildings, and I'm going to go ahead and draw those points back to the vanishing point to trace where in space they're receding into. It'll make more sense when I do it. I'm going to go ahead and start from left to right because I'm right-handed and I don't want to smudge my work too much. So let's see. Buildings with slanted roofs do pose a bit of a challenge because the slant of the roof is its own thing and it's not in one point perspective. We'll talk more about that in a second, but don't freak out, it's not a big deal. What I did just there was I went ahead and I traced the top of the roof of that building. Now I'm going to trace the bottom of the building down to back to the vanishing point. And then I'm going to find the top of this next tall building here. And trace it. I'm going to find the slant of the top of this building here in the background. And trace that. Okay, so I've traced a couple of major points. There's a lot more that I could do, but and if this was your drawing, you'd go ahead and draw a ton of lines to kind of map things out just to familiarize yourself with the composition. But let's keep it moving for the sake of this demo. I'm going to go ahead to these grain silos here on the right, and I'm going to do sort of a general line that follows the tops of the grain silos back to the vanishing point. And some of them are slightly different, but that's okay. This is just to get the general idea. There's also like a lamppost or something here in the way. You know, I just want to kind of see how they're receding by comparison, and I'll do the same thing for the base of the grain silos. Okay, cool. So we can see more or less that all of our buildings are radiating out at different angles from that vanishing point. And the center is right there, and therefore we can find the horizon line, which is the flat line that where the sun rises, where the earth meets the sky. you can find that by seeing where there would be an absolute right angle by comparison to how things are radiating out of the vanishing point. So in this case, I can see this angle's slightly down, all these angles are slightly up. So the vanishing point, the horizon line, which lines up with the vanishing point, is going to be right there. So that's where the Earth meets the sky, even though it's obscured by all this other stuff. I know that's where it is, because that's where everything would be at a straight line. So there we go. Now you can tell my lines aren't that precise. That's okay. You could use something that's more precise when you're doing this yourself. I like to do this just to kind of map things out. So then what I'm going to do, and you could do this at the beginning. I chose to do it after drawing all these lines. I'm going to go ahead and divide this into 4 quarters. So I'm going to draw like where the halfway mark is. We've already done this before. You know what I'm talking about. I'm going to do it with the Sharpie. And when I'm trying to evenly divide or draw a grid or anything, I always begin by lining my ruler up. The very bottom of the page, it's 11 inches long, so the middle is going to be at 5.5. I make one tiny little mark, and then I don't do any crazy like twisting my ruler around or anything. I just take my ruler, I shift it up, I line it up with the outside edge. I'm being sure that my ruler is more or less square with the top of my sheet of paper. I don't want my ruler doing this kind of stuff, even a little bit, because that's going to make it so that it's not equal. My grid's not equal. So I'm lining it up, 5.5. I've got these 2 dots now at the top and the bottom. So then I line my ruler up with that, and boom. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the sides. Because this sheet of paper is just some standard paper, it's 8.5 inches this way. So that means that if I were to divide it in half, it would be 4.5 inches, or 4.25 inches rather. So there we go, 4.25, 4.25, and I'll draw the line all the way across. Boom. Okay, really cool. Here's what we've got. So you can see that our vanishing point, which I'll go ahead and reinforce with Sharpie, is slightly to the right and bottom of the center. And this line here, which is our horizon line, this one here, it's just a little bit below center. So what are we going to do? Well, I'll tell you what. You can now use what you've kind of mapped out to loosely begin to, I'm vigorously rubbing my chalky hands on my black pants. You can use what you've mapped out here to then transfer to your large sheet of paper. Because of limitations of my video setup, I am not going to draw on my big sheet of paper, but please humor me and pretend that I am drawing on my big sheet of paper. So, I'm you. This is my big sheet of paper, and I have divided it into 4 equal parts. You can go ahead and draw, if you'd like, that border line around the outside edge too. It might help you map things out, just give you a little bit of extra space. You don't need to if you don't want to. So now I can basically start transferring this onto here. I am going to upload an image of all this stuff into Blackboard, but for now, just hang in there. So we identified that the horizon line was slightly below our center point. And the vanishing point, and I keep glancing over because I've got this reference image just by my side. So I'm referencing it. So the vanishing point, I'm going to say, is, it's somewhere there. I like to draw it as a little star. And then I can go ahead and start drawing in some of the angles that I've identified. So when I'm looking at my reference, I can notice that if I draw like all the way out to the edge where some of these lines intersect, it just helps me understand the angles of the lines that I'm drawing. So at first, when I'm laying out my image that's in 1-point perspective, I don't even worry too much about drawing the exact shapes of buildings and stuff. Instead, I try to isolate out the angles, and I pretend like I'm drawing all of these lines that then become this network of triangles. Let me show you what I mean so that it makes a little more sense. So I'm going to, I'm like looking at where I was just kind of tracing out the lines of the railroads. It kind of looks like they're at this kind of an angle going back to the vanishing point. This is the railroad track. And then if I look at the top of the tallest building, maybe it's like right there. So then I'll go. I kind of sketch the terminal point of the angle first because I find it easier to see where it is on the edge of the page. And then I go ahead and I draw it. I draw it with my ruler. So I'm going to, I've chosen a simple image and I've simplified it down even further by just picking a couple of points that I thought were some of the most important points. And if you're using a more complex image, you'll obviously have a lot more lines to draw. And even for this image, if you were working from this one, you might find it beneficial to spend a lot more time setting it up than I have. I'm just trying to keep it simple for the sake of time. So now that I have sketched out some basic lines, I decide that I still haven't sketched out enough lines. I'm going to add one more here. This is the bottom of the buildings, more or less. It doesn't look like a whole lot right now. Bear with me. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these lines to start to sketch in some of my buildings. And when I start sketching them in, I actually don't usually use a ruler. I've used the ruler to set up the angles, and now I'm going to be kind of loose when it comes to sketching them in. And if I want to, I can tighten it down with a ruler later. So I'm going to begin again on I always start on the side that's left because I'm right-handed and I don't want to smudge all of my work. So I'm starting on the left-hand side here. And I'm going to just start by sketching in the sunflower coal building. Now, some things that I want to point out to you. Now, the building itself, the face of it is going to be parallel to the horizon line. And the angle of the side is going to be the angle that goes back to the vanishing point because this is 1-point perspective. So that's the sunflower coal building. When it comes to the slant of the roof, that can be kind of hard to guess. You know that the slant of the roof, as it faces you, the face of the building is going to divide the roof in half, typically, if we're talking about a typical roof. So this half and this half are the same. And the angle of the roof is also going to go back towards the vanishing point, which is an angle that I didn't draw, but I'm just going to loosely sketch in like that. Now, I'm going to begin by drawing that building that's back behind here. And I started with this line of the building because I'm looking at its position relative to the smaller one. Now I'm going to start with the other line of the building. Now it's back behind this one, so just sketching it in like this. The face of it is something like this, and it's also going back to the vanishing point, but at a slightly higher angle than the other building. Then there's going to be another small building, and then this is kind of like a warehouse or something like that. And these are all going to recede back towards the vanishing point as well. Even though I didn't draw in their angles, I can sort of sketch in how they're getting smaller compared to the vanishing point. And let's see here. So again, I'm kind of keeping it loose, and that's okay. Especially in this beginning stage, you don't need to use a ruler to draw every single thing. You can sort of guess a little bit on some stuff based on the angles that you have already drawn in. So like here I'm drawing in this building here. Now, stay with me. This building is basically like a smaller rectangle on top of a bigger rectangle. And so I'm going to draw those rectangles first. So this is the bigger rectangle and the slanted roof. And then this is the smaller rectangle here on top. And then I'll throw in the slant of the roof and find where it's sitting on there, which is gonna be something like this. It's a little bit tricky. I think I messed it up. Let's erase this thing. The face of it is a bit tricky. So this part looks okay to me. The proportions of the building are not exactly as they are in the photo. And if this was my actual drawing, I might decide that that bothered me. But since this is just a little test image, it doesn't matter too much whether or not it's perfectly correct. I am drawing now. So perspective is things get small. You can look at how big versus small something is, but you can also look at where it is relative in space. Like if I look at the top of the roof here, it's higher up than the top of the roof over here. So I'm going to just draw this bit higher than that bit because it's all receding down to the vanishing point. Same with, this line here, and this part of the roof is going to be higher relative to this section of roof. And then I can drop down the line of that side of the building, and these angles of the roof will stay parallel to the horizon line. So, and then as we drop down below the horizon line, the bottom of the building is going to angle up. You got me? Okay, so when it comes to the grain silos on the other side, as they recede into the distance, they'll appear to be closer together because they get smaller, like more squished. So you might want to count how many there are, but assume that I'm just going to kind of sketch them in quickly. As they get closer to you, the distance between them gets slightly bigger because that'll create the illusion of things receding and getting smaller. So, and the lips shape is going to tilt up because you are looking at them from like right at this angle. So you're looking at them from above versus when they sit below the horizon line here, they're going to curve in the opposite way so that they appear to be sitting. When it comes to drawing the corrugation on them, where the corrugation meets the horizon line, which is this is our horizon line, the corrugation will appear to be more or less straight. And then it will just, as you go up, I'm going to exaggerate it, it'll become more and more curved following the curve up, versus as you go down, it'll curve down following that curve. So you can see how from there you can just start populating it more. Once you feel okay about what you've got, go ahead and erase out your excess lines, because that'll help you start to see what you've actually got in your composition. And then you can start adding things like the line of the trees here in the background, some of the clouds, and you can really start to turn it into your own scene. So I hope that helps you get started with one point perspective. I'm going to record some videos talking about slightly more complicated points of perspective where things are receding on either side or maybe even off the page. But if you do decide to go with this route for our perspective project, the great benefit of it is that everything's going to be receding towards the center of the page, so you don't have to worry about excess points or anything like that. I hope that helps, and I look forward to seeing what you make. Thank you so much.